The cruelest betrayals are never shouted in public. They are whispered beside champagne glasses while everyone pretends not to hear them. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Astoria Hotel scattered golden light across Naomi Ellis Whitmore's deep brown skin as she stood at the top of the marble staircase, one gloved hand resting lightly against the polished railing, while Manhattan glittered behind the towering glass walls like a kingdom built from diamonds and ambition. At 32, Naomi had mastered the art of graceful silence, the kind that came from years of standing beside powerful men in rooms where billion-dollar decisions were made with smiles that never reached the eyes. Tonight's charity gala was supposed to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Whitmore Biotech's Global Foundation for Infectious Disease Research, a cause Naomi herself had helped build long before Ethan Whitmore became the youngest billionaire in pharmaceutical history. The ivory silk gown hugging her figure moved softly with each measured breath she took, elegant without demanding attention, though attention followed her anyway. People always looked at Naomi twice. Some because of her beauty, others because they could never understand how a quiet black woman from Southside Chicago became the wife of America's most admired biotech CEO. The orchestra played low beneath the murmur of wealthy conversations as waiters carried silver trays filled with crystal champagne flutes through clusters of senators, investors, and celebrities wrapped in old money and expensive perfume. Naomi's diamond wedding ring caught the chandelier light as she adjusted the cuff of her glove, but the movement failed to calm the strange heaviness pressing against her chest tonight. Across the ballroom, Ethan Whitmore stood beneath the massive foundation banner in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his broad shoulders commanding attention without effort, his pale blue eyes colder than the winter skyline beyond the glass. He looked devastatingly handsome in the dangerous way powerful men often did when they had forgotten how to trust anyone completely. Once, those eyes softened whenever they found Naomi in a crowded room. Tonight, they barely recognized her. "Mrs. Whitmore, you look stunning as always." An older donor smiled warmly as Naomi descended the staircase. She returned the compliment with practiced elegance, though her attention remained fixed on Ethan. Something was wrong. She felt it the same way people sense lightning before a storm arrives. Near the back of the ballroom, partially hidden behind towering white orchids and camera flashes, Claire Whitmore lifted her champagne glass slowly toward Naomi. Ethan's ex-wife wore silver tonight. Cold silver, the color of knives and secrets. Naomi's stomach tightened. Claire had no reason to attend this event. Not after the ugly divorce headlines 6 years ago. Not after Ethan spent years pretending that chapter of his life had been buried forever. Yet there she stood, smiling softly like someone who already knew how the night would end. The orchestra faded as Ethan stepped onto the stage to deliver his keynote speech. The ballroom quieted instantly. Cameras turned toward him. Investors leaned forward. Ethan Whitmore always controlled a room with terrifying ease. Tonight, he began smoothly, his deep voice carrying across the chandeliers and polished marble. "We honor truth, transparency, and medical integrity." Naomi felt her heartbeat slow, then stop. Ethan's gaze found hers in the crowd, but there was no warmth left inside it now. Only distance. Only suspicion. A waiter approached the stage carrying a silver tray. Resting at its center sat a sealed white envelope marked confidential in sharp black letters. Claire lowered her champagne glass. Ethan accepted the envelope without hesitation. The silence inside the ballroom thickened beneath the glittering lights as Naomi realized, with horrifying clarity, that every terrible moment of her life was about to begin. The white envelope rested in Ethan Whitmore's hands like a loaded weapon disguised as paper, while the ballroom held its collective breath beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and camera flashes. Naomi remained perfectly still near the center of the crowd, though every instinct inside her screamed that something irreversible had already been set into motion. Ethan broke the seal slowly, his jaw tightening as his eyes scanned the contents inside. Around him, board members exchanged uneasy glances while reporters subtly lifted their phones higher, sensing scandal before truth had even entered the room. The orchestra had stopped completely now. Even the waiters no longer moved. Manhattan's elite stood frozen beneath gold light and polished marble, waiting for America's favorite billionaire to speak. Ethan looked up from the documents, and Naomi felt the exact moment his disappointment hardened into suspicion. It was there in the slight narrowing of his pale blue eyes. In the controlled inhale that lifted his chest beneath the black tuxedo she once adjusted lovingly before every gala. "Ethan," Naomi said quietly, her voice calm enough to cut through the silence without effort. "What is this?" For one terrible second, she thought he might protect her. Thought he might walk down from the stage, ignore the whispers, and remember the woman who had spent 10 years building both his company and his life beside him. Instead, Ethan stepped closer to the microphone. "These records were delivered anonymously tonight," he said carefully, every word measured for the investors, the cameras, and the powerful people whose approval had built his empire. "And according to these documents, my wife concealed serious medical information from me before our marriage." A murmur rippled through the ballroom like wind moving across cold water. Naomi's fingers tightened around the small crystal clutch hanging at her side, but her expression never cracked. Across the room, Claire Whitmore lowered her eyes modestly, pretending discomfort while satisfaction flickered briefly across her lips. Naomi saw it, saw everything. The timing, the envelope, the calculated cruelty hidden beneath elegance. "You cannot possibly believe this," Naomi said softly. Ethan descended the stage one slow step at a time until he stood only a few feet away from her beneath the massive foundation banner displaying the words "Integrity changes lives." The irony almost made her laugh. "I do not know what to believe anymore," he answered. The sentence landed harder than a scream ever could. Naomi stared at the man she had loved through every impossible year. Through the sleepless nights when Whitmore Biotech nearly collapsed during its first federal investigation. Through the panic attacks he hid from the world after his father died. Through every headline, every betrayal, every woman who wanted his money more than his heart. She had stood beside him when no one else did. And now he was choosing humiliation over trust. "You could have asked me privately," Naomi whispered. Ethan's silence was answer enough. Somewhere behind them, a reporter quietly uttered the word HIV, and suddenly the room changed. Conversations stopped pretending to whisper. Eyes shifted toward Naomi with that familiar mixture of fear and judgment reserved for people society decides to misunderstand. Naomi felt it instantly. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just clarity. The kind that arrives when love finally removes its disguise. She looked down at the diamond ring resting on her finger, the one Ethan placed there beneath snowfall in Aspen 11 years ago after promising that he would never let the world make her feel small again. Slowly, gracefully, Naomi slid the ring from her hand. The diamond caught the chandelier light one final time before she placed it carefully onto a nearby champagne tray. The soft clink echoed louder than the orchestra ever had. "Then you should have married someone you trusted," she said. Ethan's face shifted slightly, almost as if regret tried to reach him too late. But Naomi was already stepping backward through the crowd, her ivory gown moving like silence itself beneath the ballroom lights, while cameras flashed around her like distant lightning before a storm. Rain washed against the black windows of Naomi's penthouse apartment in slow silver streaks as she stood barefoot beside the city lights, still wearing the ivory gown from the gala like armor after a war no one else could fully understand. Midnight had already passed, but Manhattan never truly slept. Somewhere below, taxis moved through wet streets while helicopters crossed the skyline above towers built by men who believed money could protect them from consequences. Naomi loosened the diamond earrings from her ears one at a time, placing them carefully onto the marble counter beside the untouched glass of champagne Ethan had sent to the apartment hours earlier with no note attached. The silence inside the penthouse felt colder than winter. 10 years of marriage had left traces of Ethan everywhere. His charcoal overcoats lined beside hers in the closet. His favorite jazz records stacked beside the fireplace. The framed photograph from their trip to Martha's Vineyard still resting near the piano where he once kissed her forehead and told her she made every room feel like home. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. Some betrayals arrived loudly. Others unfolded in tiny, unbearable details. Her phone vibrated across the marble countertop for the 17th time that evening. News alerts. Unknown numbers. Gossip blogs. One headline flashed brighter than the others. Billionaire CEO accuses wife of secret illness at charity gala. Naomi turned the phone face down without opening it. She refused to let strangers narrate the collapse of her life before she even understood it herself. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Naomi already knew who it was before she opened the door. Vanessa Cole stepped inside carrying takeout coffee and the kind of loyalty money could never purchase. Vanessa had been Naomi's closest friend since nursing school in Chicago nearly 15 years earlier, long before private jets and gala invitations changed the shape of Naomi's world. "I came as soon as I saw the news," Vanessa said quietly, setting the coffee onto the kitchen island. Her eyes moved carefully over Naomi's face, searching for damage. "Tell me none of this is true." Naomi gave a small, exhausted laugh, without humor. "I wish Ethan had asked me that exact question tonight." Vanessa's expression darkened instantly. "He accused you publicly before even speaking to you privately?" Naomi stared toward the rain-covered skyline. "He looked at me like I was suddenly a stranger standing inside his life." The words settled heavily between them. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Naomi, you know this feels planned, right?" Naomi did not answer immediately because deep down she already knew. Claire's smile at the gala had not belonged to an innocent spectator. It belonged to someone watching a carefully arranged performance unfold exactly on schedule. "The envelope arrived too perfectly," Naomi finally whispered. "And Ethan never even questioned where it came from." Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "Because he still trusts Claire more than he realizes." Naomi's chest tightened at the truth of it. Claire Whitmore had spent years lingering around the edges of Ethan's empire like unfinished business wrapped in expensive perfume and polished smiles. Ethan always insisted their marriage ended cleanly, maturely. But Naomi remembered the panic attacks during thunderstorms, the late-night silences, the locked drawer in Ethan's office that still contained old photographs he never fully explained away. Claire had not lost Ethan completely. She had simply learned how to haunt him quietly. Naomi walked slowly toward the bedroom and opened the velvet jewelry box resting on the dresser. The empty space where her wedding ring belonged looked strangely peaceful now. She touched it gently before closing the lid again. "What are you going to do?" Vanessa asked. Naomi lifted her eyes toward her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup had faded. Her curls had loosened from the evening rain. But her expression remained calm, controlled, stronger than heartbreak itself. "Tomorrow morning," she said softly, "I am filing for divorce." At almost the exact same moment across the city, Ethan Whitmore sat alone inside his dark office overlooking Fifth Avenue while the confidential medical file remained open on his desk beneath cold white light. He read the documents again and again, searching for certainty, but every page only deepened the hollow feeling growing inside him. Then his phone buzzed quietly beside the file. One new message from Claire Whitmore. "I tried to warn you about her years ago." Morning arrived over Manhattan wrapped in pale gray rain and headlines sharp enough to destroy reputations before breakfast. Naomi sat quietly at the far end of Vanessa's kitchen island wearing a cream cashmere sweater and soft black trousers while untouched coffee cooled beside her hand. The television mounted above the marble counter played muted footage from the gala on endless repeat. Every network wanted the same story. America's beloved billionaire marriage collapsing beneath scandal. Commentators speculated with polished smiles while blurred photos of Naomi filled the screen beside medical terminology none of them truly understood. Vanessa grabbed the remote and switched the television off with visible disgust. "They are treating your life like entertainment," she muttered. Naomi stared down at the steam fading from her coffee cup. "That is what happens when powerful people fall apart in public." Her voice remained calm, but exhaustion lived underneath every syllable now. Around 8:30 that morning, the doorbell echoed softly through the apartment. Vanessa glanced toward Naomi carefully before walking to answer it. Seconds later, Ethan Whitmore stepped inside wearing yesterday's tuxedo beneath a dark wool overcoat, his pale blue eyes shadowed from a sleepless night that had clearly offered him no peace. Rain clung to his shoulders. He looked less like a billionaire this morning and more like a man standing inside the ruins of his own decisions. Naomi did not stand, did not rush toward him, did not ask whether he had eaten or slept or regretted what he had done. The silence between them had already changed shape overnight. Ethan removed his gloves slowly. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "can we have a moment alone?" Vanessa folded her arms immediately. After what you did to her in front of half of New York? Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. Please. Naomi finally lifted her gaze toward her friend. It is all right. Vanessa hesitated before grabbing her coat from the counter. As she passed Ethan, her expression hardened with unmistakable warning. The apartment door closed softly behind her, leaving only rain against the windows and years of broken trust standing between husband and wife. Ethan moved closer carefully, as if Naomi might disappear if he approached too quickly. I should have spoken to you privately, he said at last. Naomi gave a faint, humorless smile. That is a very small sentence for such a large humiliation. Ethan looked away. The skyline reflected faintly across the dark marble floors while silence stretched painfully through the apartment. The documents looked legitimate, he finally said. Naomi's eyes sharpened instantly. So legitimacy matters more to you than loyalty? Ethan inhaled slowly, struggling for control. Naomi, this is not just personal for me. My company is tied to public trust, investors, federal partnerships, medical ethics. Naomi stood then, graceful and composed despite the heartbreak still visible beneath her calm. And what about me, Ethan? She asked softly. Was I not part of your life before I became part of your image? The question landed heavily enough that Ethan could not answer immediately. Naomi walked toward the windows overlooking Central Park where rain blurred the city into watercolor shades of silver and steel. I spent 10 years protecting your name, she whispered. When your panic attacks nearly destroyed you after your father died, I protected you. When your first clinical trial collapsed and investors wanted your resignation, I protected you. When people whispered that I only married you for money, I protected you. Ethan's expression tightened painfully. Naomi turned slowly to face him. But the moment someone handed you a folder filled with fear, you protected yourself instead. Ethan stepped toward her then, desperation beginning to fracture the cold control he carried so naturally in public. I never wanted to hurt you. Naomi looked directly into his eyes for the first time since the gala. And yet you did it so effortlessly. The rain outside intensified against the glass, while Ethan's silence said everything his words could not repair. Naomi walked calmly toward the entryway table where a single white envelope rested untouched beside a vase of orchids. Ethan recognized the logo instantly. Sterling and Cole Family Law. Naomi lifted the envelope and handed it to him with steady hands. I filed for divorce 1 hour ago. Ethan stared down at the papers as though they physically wounded him. Naomi, her expression never changed. You chose suspicion in front of strangers, she said quietly. Now I choose dignity in front of myself. The divorce papers spread across Ethan Whitmore's office desk like fragments of a life he no longer recognized while dawn light slowly climbed over Manhattan's skyline in pale shades of blue and silver. He had built billion-dollar companies from chaos before. He had survived federal investigations, hostile takeovers, and investors who waited eagerly for powerful men to fail. Yet none of those battles had prepared him for the silence Naomi left behind. Her absence lived everywhere now. In the untouched coffee mug beside the conference room espresso machine, because no assistant ever remembered exactly how he liked it. In the empty passenger seat of the black Maybach waiting downstairs every morning. In the quiet corners of his penthouse where music no longer played after midnight. Ethan loosened his tie slowly while staring at the framed photograph still sitting beside his computer monitor. Martha's Vineyard. 7 summers ago. Naomi wearing a white sundress beneath ocean wind, while laughing at something he could no longer remember. Back then, her happiness had felt permanent. Untouchable. His phone buzzed sharply against the desk, dragging him back into reality. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, his assistant reminded him cautiously through the intercom. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Reschedule it. Sir, this is the 3rd postponement. Then tell them I said I am unavailable. He disconnected before she could answer. Across the city, Naomi Ellis Whitmore sat inside a modest consultation office at St. Catherine Medical Center, wearing navy blue scrubs beneath a wool coat, while sunlight filtered softly through hospital blinds. The scent of antiseptic and fresh coffee wrapped around her like memories from another lifetime. Before galas and private jets and billionaire headlines, Naomi had once been one of the most respected infectious disease nurses in Chicago. She had loved hospitals because truth lived there. Blood tests did not care about social status. Diagnoses did not change because someone owned skyscrapers. Medicine demanded honesty. It always had. Dr. Helen Brooks reviewed Naomi's paperwork carefully over gold-rimmed glasses before offering a gentle smile. "We would be honored to have you back," she said warmly. Naomi lowered her eyes for a moment, unexpectedly emotional. "After everything happening publicly?" Dr. Brooks folded her hands calmly. "I trust professional records more than gossip blogs." The sentence settled deeply inside Naomi's chest because trust had suddenly become something painfully rare. Outside the office window, nurses moved quickly through bright hospital hallways while patients waited with quiet hope resting in tired eyes. Life continued forward here regardless of scandal or headlines. Naomi found comfort in that. "You know they are attacking you online," Dr. Brooks added carefully. Naomi nodded once. "People fear what they do not understand." "And your husband?" Naomi's expression remained composed, though sadness briefly darkened her eyes. "My husband feared losing control more than losing me." Later that afternoon, Ethan stood inside Whitmore Biotech's executive conference room, surrounded by board members whose nervous expressions reflected the chaos now threatening the company's reputation. Financial reports glowed across enormous screens while lawyers whispered urgently near the windows. "Investors are concerned about public trust," one executive explained cautiously. "The foundation donors are requesting clarification regarding your wife." Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. "Naomi is still my wife." The room fell silent. Another board member shifted uncomfortably before sliding a tablet across the table. "The media released new photos this morning." Ethan looked down. Images of Naomi leaving St. Catherine Medical Center filled the screen beneath cruel headlines questioning whether she secretly exposed hospital patients to illness. The comments underneath were even worse. "Ignorant, vicious, inhuman." Ethan stared at the screen too long before finally speaking in a dangerously quiet voice. "Who leaked these?" No one answered immediately. Then Marcus Hale, Whitmore Biotech's chief legal officer, cleared his throat carefully. "Claire Whitmore has been speaking privately with several media outlets since the gala." Ethan's eyes lifted slowly. "What?" Marcus hesitated. "She claims she only wants to protect the company." Something cold moved through Ethan then. Not certainty, not truth, just the first sharp crack in the story he had trusted too easily. That evening, while rain once again covered Manhattan in silver shadows, Ethan opened the confidential file for the 100th time. His eyes stopped suddenly on a detail he somehow missed before. The medical record number printed at the top of every page did not belong to Naomi Ellis Whitmore. It belonged to someone named Claire Bennett Whitmore. The city outside Ethan Whitmore's office glowed in cold midnight blue, while the mistaken medical record number burned across his computer screen like a confession hidden in plain sight. Claire Bennett Whitmore, not Naomi Ellis Whitmore. Ethan stared at the words again, slower this time, as dread settled heavily into his chest. For the first time since the gala, certainty abandoned him completely. The office felt painfully silent except for rain tapping against the glass walls 70 stories above Manhattan. Ethan loosened his collar, suddenly unable to breathe comfortably inside his own skin. How had he missed it? Because he had not wanted to look too closely. Because fear had arrived wrapped inside paperwork and authority. Because somewhere deep down, Claire still knew exactly how to manipulate the parts of him that distrusted happiness whenever it became too real. Ethan grabbed the file and stormed toward Marcus Hale's office despite the late hour. The legal department floor remained mostly dark except for scattered desk lamps glowing against polished marble and glass. Marcus looked up in visible surprise as Ethan entered without knocking. "Tell me this is a clerical error," Ethan demanded, throwing the file onto the desk hard enough for several pages to scatter loose. Marcus adjusted his glasses quickly before reading the documents again. His expression shifted almost immediately. "This record belongs to Claire," he said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then why was Naomi's name attached to it? Marcus hesitated too long. Ethan noticed instantly. "What are you not saying?" Marcus leaned back slowly, visibly uncomfortable. 3 days before the gala, Claire requested access to archived foundation records. She claimed she wanted copies for a memoir project connected to Whitmore Biotech's charity work. Ethan felt something cold move through him, and nobody questioned that. "She still has relationships inside the company," Marcus admitted carefully. Most people assumed she had your approval. Ethan closed his eyes briefly as regret struck him harder than anger ever could. Naomi had trusted him for 10 years. 10 years. Yet one envelope from Claire had destroyed everything in less than 10 minutes. Across the city, Naomi walked through the quiet pediatric wing at St. Catherine Medical Center carrying a stack of patient charts beneath soft fluorescent light, while children's drawings decorated the hallway walls around her. The hospital calmed her in ways luxury never could. Here, people did not care about gala scandals or billionaire headlines. They cared about healing, about survival, about truth. A little girl with braided hair waved excitedly from one of the recovery rooms. "Miss Naomi." Naomi smiled warmly and walked over. "You should be sleeping, Miss Olivia. Nurses cannot tell superheroes when to sleep." The little girl whispered seriously. Naomi laughed softly for what felt like the first genuine time in weeks. "Is that so?" Olivia nodded proudly before lowering her voice. "My mama said people on television were being mean to you." Naomi's smile faded slightly, but remained gentle. "Sometimes people believe stories before they know facts." The child studied her carefully with innocent wisdom adults often lost somewhere along the way. "But you are still nice." Naomi swallowed against the sudden emotion tightening her throat. "Thank you, sweetheart." Later that night, as Naomi prepared to leave the hospital, an older woman approached her carefully near the employee entrance. She wore faded navy scrubs beneath a long beige coat and carried visible nervousness in tired eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Naomi turned politely. "Yes." The woman hesitated before speaking quietly. "My name is Diane Mercer. I used to work at Whitmore Biotech's private medical clinic." Naomi immediately sensed something important beneath the woman's trembling voice. "What is this about?" Diane glanced around the nearly empty hallway before stepping closer. "I saw the news coverage," she whispered. "And I need you to know. Those records were altered." Naomi's heartbeat slowed instantly. "Altered?" Diane nodded carefully. "Claire came to the clinic herself 6 years ago. She paid someone to change identifiers on archived files after her divorce from Mr. Whitmore." Naomi stared at her in stunned silence. "Why would she do that?" Diane's eyes darkened with sympathy. "Because Claire was terrified the truth would ruin her social standing. And because she knew one day those records could become a weapon." Naomi felt the world sharpen around her with sudden, terrifying clarity. Diane slowly handed over a small sealed flash drive. "I copied everything before I resigned," she whispered. "Audit logs, file edits, payment records. I could not stay silent anymore after what happened to you." Naomi looked down at the flash drive resting in her palm beneath the harsh hospital lights, while rain continued falling outside, like heaven itself, trying to wash the city clean. The divorce hearing was scheduled on a Thursday morning beneath a cold February sky, while Manhattan disappeared behind layers of gray rain and television vans crowded the courthouse steps like predators waiting for blood. Naomi stepped from the Blacktown car, wearing a fitted charcoal coat over a cream silk blouse. Her curls swept neatly beneath the collar, while camera flashes exploded around her from every direction. Reporters shouted questions with manufactured urgency. "Mrs. Whitmore, are the allegations true? Did you deceive your husband before the marriage? Are you seeking financial compensation?" Naomi never slowed her pace, never lowered her head. The courthouse doors opened before her like the entrance to another battlefield built from marble, silence, and judgment. Across the lobby, Ethan Whitmore stood beside his legal team in a navy wool overcoat, his expression distant and exhausted beneath days of sleepless regret. The moment his eyes found Naomi, the noise around them seemed to disappear completely. For the first time since the gala, Ethan noticed what humiliation had cost her. Not weakness, not collapse, but distance. A quiet, untouchable distance that frightened him far more than anger ever could. Naomi passed him without stopping. The scent of jasmine and rain lingered briefly in the air behind her, painfully familiar. "Naomi," Ethan said softly. She paused only long enough to glance toward him. "Save your explanations for the courtroom," she replied calmly before continuing toward the elevator with her attorney beside her. Ethan watched the elevator doors close and felt the terrible realization settle deeper inside him. He had not merely damaged his marriage. He had destroyed the one place in his life where he was loved without condition. Courtroom 12 carried the cold elegance of old New York wealth. Dark oak walls, brass light fixtures, Rows of polished benches filled with journalists pretending objectivity while waiting for scandal. Naomi sat quietly beside her attorney, Victoria Sterling, whose reputation for dismantling powerful men inside courtrooms was almost legendary. Across the aisle, Claire Whitmore entered wearing a white designer coat and pearls arranged carefully enough to suggest innocence. Ethan noticed immediately how composed she appeared. Too composed. Claire leaned toward him gently. "You look tired," she whispered. Ethan did not answer. His eyes remained fixed on the flash drive resting beside Naomi's legal files. Something about the calm certainty in her posture unsettled him deeply. Judge Eleanor Hayes entered sharply at 10 o'clock. The room rose instantly before settling into tense silence. Victoria Sterling stood first. "Your Honor, before divorce proceedings continue, we request permission to present evidence connected to fraudulent medical records used to publicly defame my client." A wave of whispers spread instantly across the courtroom. Claire's expression tightened almost invisibly. Ethan felt his pulse slow. Victoria connected the flash drive to the courtroom monitor while Naomi remained perfectly still beneath the cold overhead lighting. "These records," Victoria continued calmly, "were manipulated inside Whitmore Biotech's private clinic system 6 years ago. Audit logs filled the courtroom screens line by line. Dates, user identifications, security access points, payment transfers. Every digital trail pointed toward one name: Claire Bennett Whitmore." Ethan stared upward in complete silence while color slowly drained from Claire's face. Victoria's voice sharpened with controlled precision. "The confidential file shown publicly at the gala did not belong to Naomi Ellis Whitmore. It belonged to Claire Whitmore herself." The courtroom erupted instantly. Reporters scrambled for phones. Lawyers whispered frantically. Judge Hayes slammed her gavel for order while Claire visibly panicked beside Ethan. "That is not true," Claire snapped suddenly, her voice cracking beneath pressure for the first time. "Those files were private." Victoria turned calmly toward her. "Exactly. Which raises the obvious question, Mrs. Whitmore. How did your private records become attached to Naomi's identity?" Claire's composure fractured further. "I was protecting Ethan," she said desperately. "She manipulated him. She wanted his company." Ethan looked toward Claire slowly, disbelief hardening inside his pale blue eyes. "Stop talking," his attorney whispered urgently beside him. But Claire continued unraveling beneath the weight of exposure. "You never understood what she was doing to you," Claire insisted toward Ethan. "After our divorce, I lost everything while she became the perfect wife standing beside your empire like she belonged there." The silence that followed felt colder than winter itself. Ethan stared at the woman he once trusted and suddenly saw not heartbreak, not vulnerability, but calculation hidden beneath years of polished elegance. Then his gaze shifted toward Naomi. She sat quietly beneath the courtroom lights with no triumph on her face. No cruelty, only dignity, the kind he should have defended from the beginning. The courthouse steps shimmered beneath afternoon rain as reporters flooded the sidewalks outside waiting for someone to break first. But it was not Naomi Ellis Whitmore who collapsed beneath the weight of public exposure that day. It was Claire. By the time the hearing recessed for lunch, every major news network in America had already rewritten the story. The elegant former socialite who once posed beside charity boards and luxury magazine covers was now being questioned for medical fraud, evidence tampering, and defamation. Inside a private hallway near Courtroom 12, Claire stood beside a marble column gripping her designer handbag tightly enough for her knuckles to pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Her perfectly composed image had begun to crack around the edges. Mascara slightly smudged. Breathing uneven. Pride unraveling thread by thread. Ethan approached slowly through the empty corridor, his dark overcoat hanging open while regret shadowed every exhausted line of his face. Claire looked up instantly. "Ethan, please listen to me." His expression remained cold now in a way Naomi's silence had never been. "You forged medical records." Claire stepped closer desperately. "I did it because I knew she would destroy everything between us." Ethan stared at her as though seeing a stranger for the first time. There was no us anymore. Claire's eyes filled immediately, but even now Ethan recognized something terrifying beneath the tears. Not remorse. Possession. "You replaced me with her so easily," Claire whispered bitterly. "Do you know what it felt like watching everyone worship Naomi like she saved your life?" Ethan's jaw tightened sharply. She did save my life. The hallway fell silent. Ethan thought about every moment Naomi stood beside him during the darkest years of his career. The panic attacks hidden from investors. The nights he woke unable to breathe after his father's funeral. The exhaustion. The pressure. The fear of failing publicly. Naomi had carried him through all of it quietly, without demanding applause. And he repaid her by humiliating her beneath crystal chandeliers, because one old ghost whispered fear into his ear. Claire shook her head slowly as tears slipped down her cheeks. I only wanted you to remember me. Ethan looked toward the courthouse windows where rain blurred Manhattan into silver shadows. No, he said quietly. You wanted control. Across the building, Naomi sat alone inside a private conference room while muted sunlight pressed softly against the tall windows beside her. Victoria Sterling had stepped away to handle reporters, leaving Naomi alone with the silence she suddenly preferred more than company. On the polished oak table rested the final divorce settlement papers beside a cup of untouched tea growing cold. Naomi stared at the papers without emotion. She expected to feel victorious after the truth came out. Instead, she only felt tired. Some truths arrived too late to repair what they destroyed. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Ethan entered carefully before closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. The room carried the quiet ache of two people standing inside the aftermath of love. Ethan removed his gloves slowly, unable to meet her eyes immediately. I was wrong, he said at last, his voice rough with honesty stripped of pride for the first time in years. Naomi looked at him calmly. Yes, you were. Ethan swallowed hard. There is no excuse for what I did to you. Naomi lowered her gaze briefly toward the divorce papers. No, there is not. The honesty between them felt heavier than shouting ever could. Ethan moved closer but stopped several feet away as though understanding he no longer had the right to stand near her without permission. I trusted fear more than I trusted you, he admitted quietly. Naomi's eyes softened with sadness, not weakness. You trusted someone who knew exactly how to manipulate your fear. Ethan looked at her then, truly looked at her, and finally understood the full cost of his failure. Naomi was no longer the woman waiting for him to choose her. She had already chosen herself. I would do anything to fix this, he whispered. Naomi's expression remained gentle, but impossibly distant now. Some damage does not heal because apologies arrive, she said softly. Some damage heals because the person who survived it learns they deserved better all along. Ethan felt those words settle into his chest with devastating permanence, while rain continued falling beyond the courthouse windows like the city itself mourning something beautiful that would never fully return. Spring arrived quietly over Manhattan 3 months later, softening the city with pale sunlight and the scent of rain warming against concrete sidewalks, while life continued moving forward in ways heartbreak never expects. The headlines eventually disappeared. Another billionaire scandal replaced the last one. Another public downfall entertained the world for a week before being forgotten beneath newer disasters. But some stories did not vanish so easily, especially the ones that changed people permanently. Naomi Ellis no longer used the Whitmore name. The final divorce decree sat ensigned inside a drawer she rarely opened anymore, because freedom did not require constant revisiting. St. Catherine Medical Center had promoted her to Director of Community Infectious Disease Outreach after her work rebuilding public education programs across underserved neighborhoods gained national recognition. Every Thursday evening, she visited schools, churches, and women's shelters throughout New York, speaking calmly about medical truth, dignity, and the danger of fear disguised as judgment. People listened because Naomi spoke without bitterness. That was what made her powerful now. Not revenge, not wealth, peace. On a warm April evening, Naomi stood beneath golden lights inside the Metropolitan Health Foundation ballroom, while applause filled the room around her. The foundation was honoring her humanitarian work with a National Advocacy Award, and unlike the last gala that shattered her marriage, tonight carried no performance. No hidden cruelty waiting inside champagne glasses. Just respect honestly earned. Her emerald silk gown shimmered softly beneath the chandeliers while cameras flashed with admiration instead of suspicion. Vanessa stood near the front table, already crying proud tears into a napkin. You deserve every second of this, she mouthed silently. Naomi smiled warmly before stepping toward the stage. The audience rose in a standing ovation as she accepted the Crystal Award carefully between steady hands. There was a time, Naomi began softly into the microphone, when I believed survival meant convincing people to see my worth. The ballroom quieted instantly. But survival is not about proving yourself to those determined to misunderstand you. It is about refusing to lose your dignity while they do. Silence settled deeply through the crowd. Honest silence. The kind that arrives when truth reaches people before applause can interrupt it. Near the back of the ballroom, Ethan Whitmore stood unseen beside the entrance in a dark tailored suit, his hands folded quietly before him, while regret lived permanently behind his pale blue eyes now. He had not intended to come inside. He only wanted to see her once from a distance after reading about the award in the morning paper. But the moment Naomi stepped onto that stage, radiant and composed beneath the chandeliers, Ethan realized something painful and beautiful all at once. She had rebuilt her life without needing him to repair it first. Naomi continued speaking gracefully beneath the warm lights. The world teaches us to fear humiliation as though it is the end of our story. But sometimes humiliation becomes the doorway to the life we were meant to build all along. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly because no sentence had ever described his greatest mistake more perfectly. After the ceremony ended, guests filled the ballroom with conversation and music while waiters carried trays of champagne beneath golden light. Naomi stepped onto the quiet outdoor terrace overlooking Central Park, welcoming the cool spring air against her skin. A few moments later, she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan stopped several feet away beside the stone railing, careful not to intrude upon the peace surrounding her now. "Congratulations," he said quietly. Naomi turned toward him calmly. "Thank you." For a moment neither spoke while Manhattan glittered endlessly below them like a city still learning how to forgive itself. Ethan looked at her with painful honesty. "I spent months wishing I could undo that night." Naomi's expression softened gently. "I know." Ethan swallowed hard. "Do you think there will ever be a way back for us?" Naomi looked out over the skyline before answering. "Some people come into our lives to teach us how love feels," she said softly. "Others teach us how dignity feels after love fails." Ethan closed his eyes briefly against the truth inside her words. Naomi stepped closer then, not with romance, not with bitterness, but with grace. "I forgive you, Ethan," she whispered. But forgiveness and return are not the same thing. Tears gathered silently in Ethan's eyes for the first time in years while the city lights reflected across the distance between them. Naomi offered him one final gentle smile before turning toward the ballroom once more, her emerald dress catching the spring light like hope reborn. And as Ethan watched her walk away beneath the chandeliers, he finally understood the cruelest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest loss in a man's life is not the woman he betrayed. It is the woman he never deserved to lose.